The Switch. This little Wii U on steroids has been around for like 8 years now. With 1,000,000 hours spent on this thing, most of which for some reason were spent playing Mario Maker 2 for some reason, I have so many fond memories associated with this console. Whether it was collecting hundreds of moons in Mario Odyssey, eating a car in Kirby and the Forgotten Land, or smashing Bros and Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, this console has been home to some of my favorite games and my favorite gaming memories. And hey, with the recent announcement of the Switch's successor, I've started to feel really nostalgic about this console and the games that released on it. So to satisfy my nostalgia, I thought it would be cool to take a look back at the life and times of the Nintendo Switch and see if it's really as good as I remember. Now, I'm not going to cover everything that's ever come out on the Switch, mainly because that would take an eternity, so I'm just going to focus on the major first-party games, mainly the ones that I've played, that released each year for the system. Now, the first year of the Switch was such a stark contrast from what we saw on the Wii U. Instead of getting games that just kind of emulated what games on the Wii and 3DS already did, we got brand new ambitious experiences like no Nintendo fan had ever seen before. This of course started at launch with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. This was the first ever fully open world Zelda game, and people absolutely loved it. The game got praised when it released, with people calling it the best Zelda game ever made, which is 100% true, and I'm absolutely willing to die on this hill. This game was revolutionary for the series, and brought about concepts that we would see implemented in future titles. The best two examples of this are in Tears of the Kingdom and Echoes of Wisdom. Tears of the Kingdom of course just builds off what Breath of the Wild already did and makes it 10 times better, but Echoes of Wisdom takes that traditional top-down Zelda formula and implements the more do-it-your-way mechanic, just like what we saw in Breath of the Wild. This game had a massive impact on the Switch's life and the overall Zelda series as a whole. This game had a massive impact not only on the Switch, but also the Zelda series as a whole. This game showed that games on this new console are going to be ambitious and harken back to what people already liked about older games and push the series far further than anyone could have ever expected. Now, this game released alongside a few other games, but none of them were all too really interesting. Snipper Clips was a super fun multiplayer puzzle game based around cutting yourself in half, and 1-2 Switch is probably one of the oddest games I've ever had the misfortune of playing in my life. Yeah, it kind of tries to be like Wii Sports, but falls flat in pretty much everything it tries to do. But this clip of this guy trying to eat a Joy-Con is probably the best thing to come out of the package. However, the game that Nintendo was trying to make the most successful, besides Breath of the Wild obviously, was ARMS. And even though I do think this game is kind of fun, it's just kind of super boring. While I do think this game is super fun to play, like it reminds me of the old Wii Sports boxing game, it just wasn't able to hold players. This game also shows that Nintendo was maybe trying to lean back into the more gimmicky stuff that made the Wii so successful back in the day, like the forced motion controls in the game. However, despite some of the games at launch being really mid, the Switch exploded into popularity, mainly in thanks to Breath of the Wild, and quickly became one of the most exciting consoles to own at the time. I mean, what other console was there? The Xbox One? That thing would have paid you to play it. With this fantastic launch, Nintendo fans were finally getting out of that slump that the Wii U era had left them in for years, and were actually starting to get super excited for the next big release for the console, and they didn't have to wait long to get it. In August, Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle released, a game that seemed like it came out of completely nowhere. However, despite people fearing that this was going to be another Rabbids-themed party game, just with Mario and crew, this game completely blew Switch users out of the water. Instead of being a stupid simple party game, this game took the role as a tactics shooter, and I absolutely love it. The movement and actions just feel so good, and even though I'm not a really big fan of shooters, I had a really great time with this game. Everything in this game just works so well together. You can just tell that the people who made this game had a blast doing it and were so passionate with what they were creating. And don't even get me started on the visuals. Mario games usually look super good and charming, but they aren't really too cartoony. But that's exactly what this game's visuals go for, and I absolutely love it. This game helped to cement that even Nintendo's riskier titles that maybe a lot of people wouldn't be interested in will perform extremely well on the Switch. However, by far my favorite game that released this year was Super Mario Odyssey. Ever since the release of Mario Galaxy, the 3D Mario games have been moving further and further away from the more open-ended 3D Mario games that was first established in Mario 64. Now, that's not to say that these games are bad, quite the contrary actually, but people were starting to get a real hankering for a true open 3D Mario game. And with the release of Breath of the Wild earlier in the year, it seemed like this could finally happen. However, no one expected just how amazing Mario Odyssey would be. At release, this game was praised by critics and players alike, and actually received a 10 out of 10 on IGN, which is pretty freaking good. Now, this is by far my favorite Mario game, like, ever, and to an extent is probably one of my favorite games of all time. This entire game is just super smooth, and is the best Mario has ever felt and controlled in 3D. Everything that this game tries to do and go for, it achieves in strides. Even though the million moons you can collect in this game can be a little bit draining, I found the ways you collect each and every one of them to be super entertaining. The visuals in this game are also just amazing, and help to bring the Mario series out of that generic look that it had been stuck in during the Wii U era. This game is just amazing, and no criticism towards it can make me consider it less than a 10 out of 10. I mean, I did 100% the game twice, so I obviously like it. Now, I know Xenoblade was also released this year, but I'm not really a big RPG fan, unless they're of the Mario variety for some reason, so I never got around to playing these games. However, what I've heard of it online makes it seem really good. I've always admired the Xenoblade series, and just how they're able to push Nintendo's hardware to its fullest potential, and also just how seriously they take themselves. It's really awesome. This added another phenomenal game to the Switch's first year lineup. Splatoon 2 also came out this year, another great game that built off what the first one did so good. This was actually my first interaction with the series, mainly because my gamepad's left trigger was stuck, so I couldn't play the first Splatoon game on the Wii U. But I'm so happy that I got to play this game. Well, yeah, I'm not really a super fan of the series. I've played Splatoon 3 and haven't really gotten into it, but I can't help but appreciate what the series did for Nintendo. These games helped to give Nintendo a successful new IP to launch their new system with. These games are also just super well made, with fairly tight controls and a really good vibe that all of these games seem to try to have. This was just such an amazing first year for the Switch, and proved to fans everywhere that Nintendo was willing to bat 100 for this console. With all the exciting new releases that came out this year, people were starting to get really excited for what the next year and the future of the Switch as a whole had coming, and they didn't have to wait long to find out. In comparison to 2017, 2018 was a much more chill year for Nintendo. Still riding high from the success of 2017, this year consisted of mostly remakes and remasters, with a few new little titles sprinkled in throughout. All this can seem like a bad thing. I mean, I personally favor new games or remakes, but most of the remakes and remasters that they put out this year were really good. First in the remaster list, we got the Bayonetta games. Now, I've never played any of these games and also don't really plan to, but I do really like the style they're going for. Everything that I've seen about these remasters look great, and most players view them as the best versions of the games, probably because they don't have to play them on the shitbox that was the Wii U. I also really like how Nintendo adopted this series and saved it from its inevitable death, which is definitely something that we'll see more of in the future. Next up in May, we got a port of Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, and thank God we got a port of this game on the Switch. Yeah, it kinda sucks that this port released for $60 when the original released for only $40, but that doesn't really matter because this game is absolutely amazing. This game controls like butter. It kinda does platforming better than anything that Mario was willing to dish out in the Wii U era. Even by the fact that the two DK games that they've released are critically acclaimed, but it was such a shame that this game was originally released on the Wii U. Despite how great this game looks, it kinda tended to chug sometimes on the Wii U, especially during the loading screens for some reason. However, the Switch port fixes everything, and it's by far the best version of the game. Sure, the extra content is kinda lame, like the new Funky mode, which pretty much just plays as baby's first platformer, but all in all, this is a fantastic package, and a wonderful port of an already outstanding game. The other Wii U port this year was Captain Toad's Treasure Tracker, which released in early July. In comparison to the Tropical Freeze port, this is definitely less exciting, but it's still a super good port. I remember playing the original game back on the Wii U in 2014, so whenever this port got announced, I was super excited for it. And in action, the port is super solid, but there is a little bit of jank to it. If you don't know, the original game was built around using the gamepad at all times, and figuring the fuck out of that little screen to do pretty much everything. However, the Switch only has a touchscreen in handheld mode, so obviously they had to come up with some way for it to work in dock mode. They decided to add this little ball thing to the screen whenever it was in dock mode, and even though it can make the screen a little bit cluttered, I didn't really mind it. It was probably the only way that they could have made it work. In addition, they added a bunch of Mario Odyssey themed levels to the game. However, they took out the 3D World themed levels that were originally there, so that kinda sucks. All in all, this is a pretty good port, and brought a game that a lot of people hadn't been able to play before to a new audience of people who own the Switch, which is great. The other big remakes to come out this year were Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Now, these games are remakes of Pokemon Yellow, which is one of the fan-favorite Pokemon games. But they didn't really stick too close to the source material. While the game still followed the basic beats that happened in the original, instead of having the classic Pokemon battle system during every interaction, they're instead replaced by these capturing battles, which are a lot like the ones we saw in Pokemon Go. Now, with this being the first ever mainline home console Pokemon game, you would think that they'd make this game like all the others. But nope, they decided to pace it around the fucking mobile game for some reason. But this kinda does make sense, because at the time, Pokemon Go was the most popular game on like the planet, so they wanted to incorporate some of that stuff into an actual game. But in practice, it just kinda sucks. The controls of this game absolutely reek, with you having to control the game with one Joy-Con, because they wanted to add the Pokemon Go elements into the game. All in all, these remakes just suck. But for some reason, that didn't stop them from becoming one of the best-selling games on the Switch. My god, I hate how well this console sells stuff sometimes. However, this year didn't just consist of remakes. No, we actually got a few new games, starting in March with the release of Kirby Star Allies. Just like the two previous games on the 3DS, this game builds upon a lot of the same bases that Return to Dreamland created on the Wii, and honestly, it works pretty well here. While this game is pretty boring and honestly super easy, mainly because of the new friend mechanic, which allows you to recruit pretty much any enemy in the game onto your team. I still really enjoy this game though. This is a game that you just kinda gotta turn your brain off to play, which I completely get if you consider that a bad thing, but this is a game that I used to play all the time just to wind down. While this game isn't as visually unique or creative as it could be, unlike the future Kirby games that we'd see on the Switch, I still think that is pretty good, and an okay first entry for the series on the Switch. The next new game that came out this year was Super Mario Party in October, and dear god, how did they both do so good and so bad at the same time. Coming off of the few games that came before, which were the ones that trapped you and everyone you were playing with in that stupid fucking car, this game is a return to form for the series and allows everyone to move independently from one another. This is a great thing, because this allows the game to be actually fun to play with friends and not just a bore fest like the last couple of games had been. However, they completely fucked this up by having the boards completely useless and dogshit. This is because, for some dumbass reason, they made every board in the game grid-based, which makes them super boring and repetitive after a couple playthroughs with friends. That's why this game is so confusing. However, despite how shit Super Mario Party was, there was one final big release for this year. On December 7th, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate released, and holy shit, this game is a banger. This game is a culmination of every Smash Bros. Game that ever released before it, with it having every character and stage from the previous games. I've played this game since it launched, and don't see myself stopping anytime soon. I love absolutely everything about this game, from the loads of characters that they included, all the way to the inarguably kind of bad story mode. I just absolutely love everything that this game is trying to go for, with the returning characters from the past games being slightly reworked to control perfectly, and the newcomers have super cool and tightly designed moves. This is also one of the few Switch games to get DLC that's actually worth a damn. From November 1st, 2018 to October 5th, 2022, this game consistently released DLC fighters in 2 different fighter packs. These additional fighters span a bunch of different series, from Banjo-Kazooie all the way to Minecraft Steve for some fucking reason. This is by far the best Smash game ever released, no ifs or buts about it. Even though some people prefer the movement and melee, Ultimate is by far the most complete and fulfilling Smash game to date, which has helped it become one of the best-selling games on the Switch. Smash Ultimate helped to end Nintendo's 2018 with a bang that no one would ever forget. Even though 2018 wasn't as good as 2017, it still held its own and released a bunch of major titles that Switch fans enjoyed, mainly Smash Ultimate. With the hype of these last 2 years combined, players couldn't wait to see what Nintendo had cooking in 2019. Just like 2018, this year also opened up with a remaster, but unlike that year, this year contains a whole lot more original games. The first major title to release this year was New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, and yep, this is definitely the definitive version of this game. Now, I'm not gonna say that this game is complete dog shit, but it's definitely the 2D Mario equivalent of brain damage. Even though this game feels pretty good and tight to control, everything about this game is just so boring. Back when this series started on the DS, people were really interested in it, mainly because we hadn't seen a mainline 2D Mario game in like forever. Except for that one painting level that is actually really cool. And yes, I agree with everyone else on the internet that the rest of the game should have looked like this. So this game kind of being poorly received on the Wii U, people weren't really all too excited for this remaster, and I'd say that's fair. Whilst this remaster is definitely the best version of the game, just because it's now on modern consoles, some of the things that they changed in it are pretty stupid. For example, they added 2 new playable characters, Nabbit, which pretty much just acts like baby mode, and Toadette, who can turn into Peachette, which definitely did not destroy the internet for a couple of months. If you try to play with 4 people, which the game is designed for, someone is forced to play as one of these easier characters, which is pretty annoying because they're stupid easy. With all of this is probably one of Nintendo's weakest additions to the Switch's library. It made people horrified for the future of 2D Mario games. However, getting off of that game, the next major game we got was Yoshi's Crafting World. This game is just kinda strange to me, because I remember playing it back when it released and really liking it, but I remember pretty much nothing else about it. This game came from Goodfield, which made the previous Yoshi game, Yoshi's Woolly World, which I absolutely adored. So my expectations for this game were super high. But in practice, this game is largely forgettable. This game tries to go for a similar style as Woolly World, with that whole arts and crafts thing, but it doesn't look nearly as good. To me, the game style kind of feels muddy and cluttered, which I understand is what they're trying to go for with the whole arts and crafts thing, but it's not really super appealing to me. And even though this game is tightly designed, like pretty much every Nintendo platformer, the game is also super easy, which really isn't a bad thing, but it makes the game super boring. This is what I think makes the game kind of forgettable. In a lot of games I've played, there have been some challenge in the way that makes me remember the game or just loathe it, but this game literally has no challenge, and that makes it super forgettable. So with Nintendo's 2019 opening up with these 2 kind of disappointing and lackluster releases, I was starting to get a little worried about this year's release schedule. However, I was quickly relieved of the stress with the next big release. On June 28th, Super Mario Maker 2 was released, and oh my god, this is probably my favorite Switch game ever. I loved the first Mario Maker game back when it released on the Wii U, but it kinda got boring over time because of how limiting the creation tools were, like having no slopes for some goddamn reason. But with the release of Mario Maker 2, all of my hopes had come true. The creator interface was now much more advanced, with the addition of slopes in the Super Mario 3D World game style, with people actually being able to create more advanced and creative levels when compared to the first game. Even though the way you actually create levels is a little gimped when compared to the first game, mainly because you can't use the touchscreen unless you're in handheld mode, I love everything about this game. I mean, this is by far my most played game on the Switch, with me having over 100 hours into the game, so I obviously like it a lot. However, the one thing I don't like about this game, and in all honesty, it's not even the game's fault, is how Nintendo handled it after release. With Nintendo actually doing worthwhile DLC in this generation, I was really expecting them to do some cool stuff with this game. But nope, the updates post-launch were just kinda lame. Even though they did add some cool things in the updates, like some power-ups and being able to compile all of your levels into your own super world, they ended the major updates after a little under a year after the game's release, which is kinda dumb. But despite this, I absolutely love this game, and I think it's one of the best games that Nintendo have released for the Switch ever. After this, we got a few minor releases like Ultimate Alliance 3 and Tetris 99, but the next major release was on September 20th with a remake of Link's Awakening. I remember being super excited for this game, and even though I'm not usually a fan of top-down traditional Zelda games, I really enjoyed this one. I never got around to playing the original game, so I was going into this remake completely blind, and I think that was the best way to do it. When I was playing this game, I was just kinda in awe of everything, especially the art style. I know a lot of people aren't super keen on the new style, mainly because it kinda babyfies everything in the Zelda universe, but I don't know, I really like it. I kinda always imagined the old pixelated Zelda games as little toys, so with this art style literally bringing this idea to life, I really liked it. Yeah, I know that's not the idea that the original game was trying to go for, but shut up, Link looks so cute here. From there, completely faithful remake of the original. From what I've heard online, this game pretty much just follows what the original did and just adds a few quality of life changes to help everything flow better. And in my opinion, that's all this game really needed. So all in all, this remake is just fantastic and took a game that a lot of people might not have been able to play before and made it playable for pretty much everyone in the gaming world. The next major title released on October 31st with Luigi's Mansion 3. And yep, it's time for me to fanboy out again. Coming out 6 years after the last game, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, this game is to sort of return the form for the series. While the second game took a level progression setup with multiple mansions, this game returns to keeping Luigi trapped in one location location throughout the game, and having him unlock different parts of that location as the game goes on. This game also looks absolutely phenomenal. Next Level Games, the developer who made this game and Dark Moon, did such an amazing job when it came to animating and designing this world for the new Switch generation. This began back in Dark Moon, where the best part of that game was seeing Luigi interact with the environment and just being a lovable idiot in the cutscenes. And in this game, this concept is improved upon tenfold. However, none of that mattered if the game wasn't fun to play, and lucky enough, it is. This game builds upon the mechanics first established in Dark Moon, like the addition of the Dark Light, and adds to them, making Luigi control way better than he ever has before. It's simply just fun to do shit in this game, and explore every nook and cranny of this hotel, with all of Luigi's new and improved moves. Well, yeah, there are some bad things about this game, like the sewer level and the final boss being kinda lame. All in all, I just love everything about this game. It's by far the best game in the franchise. The final major release for this year was with Pokemon Sword and Shield, and I'll be honest, I never touched these games. Like with Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, I'm not super fond of these games, and given by what I've seen online, it looks like a lot of people agree with me on this. This is the first actual mainline Pokemon game on a home console, and with that in mind, this game is just super disappointing. It just looks so flat and lifeless, and even though most of the models are super clean, they're just not used to their full potential here. The game also runs like dog ass, and somehow the struggle to use the Switch's hardware followed the Pokemon Company to this day with the release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. However, despite how shit these two games are, they still sold like 1 billion units and somehow became some of the best-selling games on the Switch. Overall, this year might not have been as full as 2018, but it had a lot more original games, which I actually prefer. Now, this year already started off a little worse than the last few years, mainly because of this little thing called a world pandemic, but Nintendo still released a few big titles this year. The first and biggest title that they released this year was Animal Crossing New Horizons on March 20th. This game was a massive success at launch, mainly because people were still stuck at home with literally nothing to do, and this allowed the game to skyrocket in popularity. I remember seeing this game everywhere back when it released, and honestly, it was a really sweet experience. Even though Nintendo kinda dropped the bag when it came to updating and providing new content to this game after launch, the game is still a great time. I love how you can completely customize your island, which is an expansion of how you can fully customize your house in New Leaf, and I think this addition makes me like the game so much more. It actually kinda reminds me of Minecraft, and how you can basically do whatever you want in your world, and I think that makes me enjoy the game a whole lot more. So all in all, this game is great, and helped a lot of people stay connected during a time when no one was allowed to be around one another. The next major release that I played was on July 17th, with the release of Paper Mario The Origami King. Now, I know a lot of people aren't really keen on this game, mainly because it's not really a return to form for the Paper Mario games, which I completely get is disappointing, but I don't know, I just really enjoyed this game. Coming off of both Sticker Star and Color Splash, this game is just such an improvement. First off, there's actual characters in this game, even though they're just regular Mario enemies that we've seen before, and even though the battle system is nothing like the traditional Paper Mario battle system, I still think it's super fun. The battle system acts more as a puzzle that you have to solve during every interaction. Even though I would have preferred to see the normal battle system here, I still really like this one. Let's just get this out of the way now. No, this is not an RPG. It's more like an action game that you play as Paper Mario in. I know that seems like a bad thing, but the exploration and act of just doing things in this game is super fun. I also love the style of it. I know a lot of people don't love the diorama look that Paper Mario has taken over the past couple years, but in my opinion, it makes complete sense. I mean, everyone in this world is made of paper after all. I know I'm kind of on the opposite side of this argument, but trust me, this game is really great, and it's probably one of the best games that released back in 2020. The next major title that released was Super Mario 3D All-Stars on September 18th. This game was announced back during the Mario 35th Anniversary Direct, along with games like Mario Bros. 35 and Bowser's Fury. However, the biggest title announced was this one, a port/slightly remastered ports of Mario 64, Mario Sunshine, and Mario Galaxy. And before you ask, yep, they totally said fuck you to Galaxy 2 for no good reason. Now, I was super excited for this release, mainly because I was now able to play these really great games on my Switch. And when it came out, I remember absolutely loving it. However, as time has gone on, I've gotten a little more cynical towards this release. Whilst I still love the idea of being able to play these games on my Switch, I feel like this release just didn't go as far as it should have. Like, even though the games are touched up a little bit, it just kind of feels like they put them through an HD conversion tool and just left it at that. I mean, Mario 64 is still in 4x3, Now, this might not seem like a big deal, and in the grand scheme of things, it's not, but modders have been playing this game in widescreen for like ever, and Nintendo didn't even bother to like put in this little bit of effort to do that. I also feel like this release is lacking a lot of charm that other Mario games have. I mean, the menu system in this game is just so boring, and I would have much more preferred to see something more Mario-ish instead of this weird museum-looking thing. So with all this in mind, even though I do think this release is super cool because you can now play these great games on your Switch, it's just a very lackluster release that's kinda disappointing. However, the final big release this year was Pikmin 3 Deluxe, which released on October 30th. And how is this a better remaster than any of the games we saw in 3 All-Stars? This game was already fantastic on the Wii U, but it somehow improved so much in this remaster. The game looks absolutely beautiful. It's probably one of the best looking games that we've ever seen on the Switch. The game also controls super well, and did a great job at breaking people away from using the Wii's motion controls in these games. Now, I'm not a super big fan of the first 2 Pikmin games, but I really love this one. And with this game doing pretty well on the Switch, I figure a lot of people did as well. I remember sales being kinda slow at the start, but they obviously picked up at some point given the fact that we got Pikmin 4 only a few years later. I just love this remaster, and I think anyone who isn't a really big fan of the first 2 Pikmin games, like I am, should definitely check this release out. So with that, Nintendo's 2020 is over. It wasn't as great as the years we saw prior, but given the fact what was happening during this year, I think it was serviceable enough. However, going into 2021, people were unsure of what we were actually going to be getting, given the fact that Nintendo was being suspiciously quiet for some reason. The first major release this year came on February 12th with the release of Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, and oh my god, this has to be one of the best Mario games ever made. Now, 3D World is pretty much just the same as you remember it. It's still the fantastic game that it was on the Wii U, and has only had a few little changes made to it, like the new photo mode and the new dive roll thing that all the playable characters can now do. However, the addition to this game that makes it actually worthwhile is the Bowser's Fury mode, and it is by far the most exciting thing in this Wii U port. Unlike most Wii U ports we got before, this is pretty much just a brand new game stapled onto the already existing 3D world. Bowser's Fury takes heavy inspiration from Mario Odyssey, and it's amazing. This game pretty much just puts you in an Odyssey-sized kingdom and tells you to explore to your little heart's content. Oh, so this is what the Mario devs have been working on for the last few years. Neat. This new mode is just so good, and you can really see how Nintendo is beginning to improve upon the concepts first established in Odyssey. The biggest example of this is how, for the most part, Lake Lapcat, the island you're stuck on in this game, pretty much just acts as a complete open world. This is also the most cinematic Mario has ever felt, at least in the games. I mean, the fight between Giga Cat Mario and Fury Bowser is just fucking awesome. And speaking of Fury Bowser, he's freaking cool in this game. I mean, this guy just looks so gnarly. You can't tell me he's not cool. Overall, this is probably the best Wii U port that we've ever seen on the Switch. We had a few minor releases after this one, like a remaster of Miitopia, which looks shockingly good for some reason, and DC Superhero Girls Team Power, whatever the fuck that means. But the next big release came on June 25th with the release of Mario Golf Super Rush, and oh my god, this game sucks ass. I don't know what's up with Nintendo in this generation, but they've been sucking ass when it comes to making Mario sports games. I mean, this game is super fun to play, but it's just so boring. There's literally nothing to do outside of the standard golf mode, and there's zero flavor to this game at all. Like most of the other games in this little series had like Mario themed courses or abilities you could perform while golfing, but everything in this game is the most cookie cutter golf aesthetic they could have gone for. However, the one thing that I really like in this game is the new mode where you can chase after the ball after you hit it. That's a pretty good time. All in all, this game is just extremely disappointing, and adds to Nintendo's track record of making very bad sports games on the Switch. However, getting off of that shit show, the next big release came on July 16th with the release of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD, and as far as I'm aware, this is definitely the definitive version of this game. I remember playing the original Skyward Sword on the Wii U via the backwards compatibility, and I actually remember really liking the motion controls whenever I first played it. Even though I like the motion control gimmick that the Wii has, I don't think it really works at all for a Zelda game where you have to explore and fight enemies, and these motion controls in the original kinda made me not want to revisit the game anytime soon. However, I'm happy to say that in this remaster, most of this stuff is fixed. The major change they made is not forcing you to have to use motion controls anymore, and only having them as a different option if you're so inclined. And in my opinion, this alone makes this the most definitive version of the game. I mean, they could have changed this one thing, and I would have been completely happy with it. though they did fix some things in this game as well, mainly the different spawn points and the graphics. Starting with the graphics, things look pretty similar as they did on the Wii, just the whole game is just spruced up a little, and looks a lot crisper. Whilst I would have preferred if they just completely remade all the assets, this is fine, given the fact that this is a fairly simple Wii remaster. The other thing that they changed is that you can now go back in the sky basically whenever you want, which is just a fantastic quality of life change. It helps the game feel a lot less janky. Overall, even though I wish that this remaster did look a little bit better, I can't really complain because all in all, it's really great. The next major title to release was WarioWare Get It Together on September 10th. This was a massive step forward for the franchise, with you actually being able to control all the little characters when you're playing through all the different microgames. And in my opinion, this makes the game way more appealing, at least to me. My favorite part about the WarioWare games already are the characters, and I feel like adding them into the microgames added a little extra flair that not a lot of the other games in the series have had. Now, I'm not saying the other games in the series are bad, quite the contrary, I actually think they're super fun, but I feel like the microgames would get a little boring at times. I also really like the style that this game has, and it kind of reminds me of a weird mashup between both 2D and 3D graphics, which I think works super well for the WarioWare series. Even though that this is kind of a smaller release, I think it's super cool, and a really good first entry for the series on the Switch. The next big release came on October 8th with the release of Metroid Dread, and oh my god, this game is an absolute masterpiece. Like most people, before this game released, I'd never actually played any of the games in the franchise before. Now, I'd seen a bunch of reviews and videos about the Metroid games on YouTube and stuff, but since none of them were really available on the Switch, I didn't really have a way to play them, at least officially. However, when this game was revealed earlier that year in the June Direct, I was super excited. This game just looks so cool and had that angsty dark vibe that most Nintendo games don't have. And once this game released, I fell in love with it. Everything about this game is just absolutely perfect. It feels so smooth and great to control. This game was primarily developed by Mercury Steam, who did the fantastic Metroid 2 remake on the 3DS, and everything in this game just kind of builds off of the things that they first created in that game. Samus now has a super cool counter ability, which was also in Return to Samus, and this ability adds such a great addition to the combat that you do in this game. And speaking of the combat, this is probably the best that it's been in the series. After this game released, I went back and actually started playing some of the past Metroid games. Without contest, this is the best feeling combat in the entire series. Mercury Steam obviously has something really good going for them, and I really hope that they get the chance to create another game for this series, because I desperately want another one. However, coming off of that fantastic game, we got Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl on November 19th, and holy shit, these games suck. I'm going to be completely honest here. I've never even touched these games, and in all honesty, I don't really have a desire to play them at all. I mean, literally everything I've seen about these games say that they're a complete dumpster fire and an awful remake of two great games. And just visually, I'm kinda torn on it. While in concept, it's very similar to what the Link's Awakening remake did, with the whole like toy aesthetic thing, but it really doesn't look great here. Instead of having the characters look like toys with all the blacked out eyes and stuff, these are pretty much just 3D versions of the 2D sprites in the original games. The battle system also just looks so boring. I know that the Pokemon battle system at basis is pretty formulaic and pretty much the same in every game, but it just looks super boring here. Everything just looks so still and lifeless, and with the battle system literally being the exact same as the original games, there was no room for advancements or new additions in this remake. So all in all, these games suck and are some of the worst Pokemon games that I've ever seen. However, to at least cap off the year somewhat well, we got the release of Mario Party Superstars. This game acts as a somewhat remake of the Nintendo 64 Mario Parties, with remade maps and mini-games, and it's super cool. I'd never actually played the OG Mario Party games before Superstar released, so with this being my first impression of these maps and mini-games, I was super impressed. Everything in this game was lovingly remade in the new Mario Party style, and it looks super good. I've always loved to see older games remade with new graphical power and aesthetics, and I just think everything looks super cool here. This is also the best state that the Mario Party franchise has been in a long time. Unlike Super Mario Party, this game is a complete return to form for the Mario Party series, with now maze-like, interconnected maps and the ability to move independently from one another. Now yes, these improvements are simply because this game is sort of a remake of the 64 Mario Party games, but I don't care, it's still super fun. I mean, a couple of years ago, me and a bunch of my friends played this game on vacation, and it's probably the most fun I've ever had playing a game with my friends. I mean, I've never wanted to beat the shit out of and high-five my friends at the same time, and I think that's like the best thing you could possibly say about a Mario Party game. Overall, I think this game is just amazing, and a much better end-of-year cap-off than the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl remakes. Overall, Nintendo's 2021 was super good, and even though we didn't get massive titles like a brand new Zelda game or a brand new 3D Mario, the stuff that was included is super good, and definitely pleased a lot of Switch fans, myself included, and we could only wait and see what Nintendo was cooking for 2022. The first big release for this year came on January 28th, with the release of Pokemon Legends Arceus, and oh my god, I can't believe it took us this long to get an actual next-gen Pokemon game. While we have had a lot of good Pokemon games on the Switch up to this point, this is the first game on the console that actually feels like it's the next step forward for the series. This game takes a sort of open-world approach, kinda like what we saw for the Zelda series in Breath of the Wild, and I feel like this type of game works perfectly for the Pokemon franchise. The world of Pokemon is already supposed to be this massive land with a bunch of creatures to capture and battle, and that idea works perfectly in this game. I really like the way you capture and battle Pokemon in this game, and I feel like it's so much more creative than anything we've seen in the series in the past couple entries. Even though this game doesn't really look or run great at all, I'm a Nintendo fan, so I kinda expect it by this point. And these slight downsides didn't affect me from enjoying the game as much as I did. The next big game to come out was on March 25th with the launch of Kirby and the Forgotten Land. This game is the next big step in the series, with it being the first fully 3D entry in the series. And oh my god, I love this game so much. When the rumors of a 3D Kirby game first started to go around, I expected it to take the form of a game more like Mario Odyssey, with these big open worlds that you can explore and collect stuff in. However, in actuality, this game is more like Super Mario 3D World. And with this newly added third dimension to the Kirby series, that makes this game super good. Kirby controls so well here, and if you were just glancing at this game, you wouldn't be able to tell it's the first 3D game in the series. It's that good. And the main stable of the Kirby series, the copy abilities, all control super good here. Even though there aren't as many copy abilities as in previous games, with them now being controllable in 3D, it feels so much more complete, and much better than just having a bunch of nothing copy abilities like in the other games. However, to make up for the lack in copy abilities, this game introduces the brand new mouthful mode abilities. For these abilities, Kirby tries to inhale things, but they're just too gosh darn big for him to fit his mouth around. And this goofy little concept, Kirby can almost eat just about anything, all the way to a car to a light bulb, and all of these abilities are super fun to play with, and are probably the best part of the entire game. I also just love the visuals of this game, and love the weird post-apocalyptic style that this game is trying to go for. With all this in mind, this is easily my favorite Kirby game, like ever, and it's probably one of the best 3D platformers that Nintendo has ever released. Skipping over Mario Strikers Battle League and Xenoblade 3, mainly because Battle League sucks, and I've never actually played Xenoblade 3, the next big release came on September 9th with the release of Splatoon 3. And am I the only one who's surprised by how many of these games we've gotten on the Switch? I know it doesn't seem ridiculous that we've gotten 2 Splatoon games on the platform, but in comparison, we've only gotten 1 original 3D Mario game, which is insane. Now, even though I really liked Splatoon 3, I really wasn't as hooked on Splatoon 3 as I was on the second one. I just don't think I'm as into Splatoon as I used to be, and in all honesty, I haven't even beat this game yet, and don't really plan on it. Despite all of this though, I can't really take away anything from this game, because of what I've played of it, it's super good. The mechanics and feel of the game are massively improved from Splatoon 2, and feels so much better than in the previous games. I also really like the post-apocalyptic style that this game tries to go for. What is it with Nintendo this year? And just like in Forgotten Land, it works super well here. There's nothing else I can really say from here except that this game is a massive improvement from the second one, and I think that anyone who's a fan of the Splatoon series should definitely try this game out. The next big games to come out were Pokemon Scarlet and Violet on November 18th. And what is with the Pokemon Company and not being able to release quality titles this generation? I've already talked about how most of the Pokemon games released on the Switch so far have been pretty janky and quite a mess, but in these games, this idea is dialed up to 11. I haven't even been brave enough to play these games yet, because I'm just afraid that my Switch will crash trying to play them. Literally everything I've seen about this game has showed how janky and buggy this game is, and how awfully it runs. I mean, the frame rate is just awful. I think my ancient 3DS could run this game better. I don't even want to talk about these games anymore because it's just making me mad because of how bad they are. Let's move on to the final game that released this year. The final game that released this year was Mario + Rabbids Sparks of Hope, and oh my god, how did they somehow improve the already fantastic Kingdom Battle? This game pretty much takes the world and mechanics created in Kingdom Battle and expands it to fit in more ideas and characters from the Mario series, and I'm completely here for it. I already love the whole idea of combining the world of the Rabbids and Mario in the first game, and seeing the idea expanded upon here is just so cool. The battle system from the first game has also been completely reworked here. Instead of moving your characters throughout this kind of grid-based map, you can now move around your characters in a full 3D environment, and it's super cool. I was already a massive fan of the battle system in Kingdom Battle, but this is just such an improvement, and I adore it so much more. I also really like the new additions to the cast in this game, like Rosalina and these weird Luma rabbit things. Overall, I just love this game, and think it's a tremendous improvement from the first game. In comparison to the previous year, I like this year so much more. Now, is that just because I got a brand new Kirby game that I absolutely adore? Yes, but fuck it, this is my video and whatever I say goes, so this year was much better than 2021. And I couldn't wait to see what Nintendo was cooking up for 2023. The first big release of this year came on February 24th with the release of Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe. And oh my god, this is how you remake a game. Unlike the other two Wii remasters and ports we've gotten on the Switch, those being Mario Galaxy and Skyward Sword, with completely remade assets and new additions to the game. This deluxe edition pretty much just takes the already fantastic Return to Dreamland from the Wii and cranks everything up to 11. First and foremost, the graphics. And oh my god, are they gorgeous. I already thought the original looked pretty good, given the fact of what hardware it was on, but this remake just took the original and added this new outline style to everything, and I love it. This new style helps the environments and enemies pop so much more. It helps the game feel so much more alive. Outside of that, the base of this game is pretty much just the same, outside of a few additions to the copy ability roster. The two new additions we got in this game were Sand and Mecha, and these are probably like top 10 copy abilities in the entire series. However, the new addition to this entire package is Magolor Epilogue. This new mode sets you as Magolor, who now has to get back to the real world after the events of the main game, and it's pretty awesome. It's really cool to see a Kirby game where you don't really play as the pink puffball, and everything that you have to do as him is super fun. All in all, this is easily one of the best remakes that Nintendo has ever done, and continues the princess treatment that Nintendo has been giving Kirby on the Switch. The next major release from Nintendo this year was Metroid Prime Remastered, and everything about this game is just so weird. That's not saying anything bad about this game, because it's actually phenomenal, but it's so weird that Nintendo would remaster this game. I mean, Metroid only has one original game on the Switch, that being Dread, and with this remaster being announced and shadow dropped on the exact same day, it almost felt like Nintendo was trying to sweep this game under the rug. However, once I picked up the game and played it, I am confident in saying that this is one of the best games that Nintendo has ever released for the Switch. Now, is that mainly because the original Metroid Prime for the GameCube is super good? Yes, but also because this is a fantastic remaster of this game. Everything in this game is just so lovingly remade and now looks like a brand new game that would have released during this generation. It also looks surprisingly good for being on the Switch. The game also controls super well. It has some great little additions added to the original. The only other thing that I can really say is that this is one of Nintendo's best modern games and should be considered the golden standard for remasters. Skipping over the Bayonetta prequel, because in all honesty, who really gives a shit about that game, the next big release came on May 12th with the release of The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. And thank God this game finally came out. Now, right off the bat, this game is super good, but thank God it's finally released so people can stop begging for it. This game builds off the already fantastic Breath of the Wild, and it works perfectly. This game still contains the main overworld that Breath of the Wild adds, but adds an above sky world and the deep dark undergrounds of Hyrule to explore. These two new additions alone make this game better than Breath of the Wild, simply because you have a bunch more places to explore and things to uncover. However, this game isn't that shallow, so of course you get a bunch of different abilities that you didn't have in Breath of the Wild. The new main ability you get in this game is the Ultra Hand, which allows you to combine a bunch of different things in the world and just make a bunch of random shit out of them. You can mainly combine these things to create new and improved weapons and weird vehicles that can help you explore the world better. I also love the fact that we get to see more of Zelda and Ganon in this game because they're awesome, especially Ganon because he's super cool. However, there was some controversy around this game back when it released, if it was a 10 out of 10 or not. And here's my take on that. If Breath of the Wild is a 10 out of 10, then this game is a 10 out of 10, simply because it's way better than the first game. Anyway, this game is simply amazing, and was well worth the wait from the original game. The next big release of this year came on June 21st, with the release of Pikmin 1+2. Now, right off the bat, these aren't remasters. These are simple ports of the original games that have been put into widescreen and spruced up just a little bit. Even though this may seem like a bad thing, and personally I would have preferred if they just remastered or just fully remade these games, I'm just super happy that these games are now on the Switch. Pikmin has always felt like Nintendo's red-headed stepchild that they remember sometimes and then probably forget about, but Pikmin has actually been getting a lot of good representation on the Switch, and I'm all here for it. I never had the chance to play these games on the GameCube or Wii, so with me now being able to play these games on my Switch, it's fantastic. This package may not be everything that it could have been, and maybe should have been fully remastered or remade, but it's still super good, and a way better way of playing these games than pulling out a dusty Wii U and playing them like that. Following the Pikmin theme, the next big game we got from Nintendo this year was Pikmin 4 on July 21st, and oh my god, I can't believe this game is actually real. I felt like it had been a million years since the original release of Pikmin 3 on Wii U, and the slight confirmation that Pikmin 4 was happening, so with this game actually releasing like a decade later, I feel like a weight has been lifted off of all Nintendo fans' shoulders. Now, I haven't personally played this game, but all the reviews and games I've seen of it online has made the game out to be one of the best in the franchise. You can now control your character and camera in a cool 360-degree movement, and this does a really good job at making the world of Pikmin feel so much bigger. The other games already felt like you were exploring this massive open world, but now with you being able to control the character and follow directly behind them, kind of like what we saw in Mario Odyssey, it makes the game feel so much bigger. That's all I can really say. This game just looks phenomenal, and a great step up from the first 3 games. Skipping right over the Detective Pikachu sequel, because who really cares about that game, the next big release we got this year came on October 20th, with the release of Super Mario Bros. Wonder. And oh my god, this is the best mainline 2D Mario game ever released. This game took the 2D Mario formula that was getting kind of boring thanks to the new Super Mario Bros. Series, and completely flipped it on its head, and injected so much life and creativity into it. This game places Mario and friends into the Flower Kingdom, which is filled with the magical Wonder Flowers, which can affect the way the world works and how you platform across the different levels. This concept alone adds so much creativity into the series, because you can literally make the characters interact and do whatever you can think of. Another big addition to this game is the new art style, and oh my god does it look beautiful. For the longest time, the new Super Mario Bros. Series has kept the 2D Mario series locked in this very generic, cookie-cutter looking style, but this game adds such a fun and creative style to the series that looks nothing like we'd ever seen before. The game looks super cool. It has the characters stylized in ways that allows them to emote and be more expressive than ever before. However, despite how much I love this game, and I really do, I do have one little gripe with it. I feel like there aren't enough. There's only a handful of power-ups in this game, like the Fire Flower and the Elephant Apple, but I really think this game could have used one extra power-up, just to stop you from having to use the same 4 power-ups throughout the entire game. Despite this complaint though, I still love this game, and it's by far my favorite 2D Mario game ever released, if you don't count the Mario Maker games. The final major release for this year was Super Mario RPG on November 17th, and oh my god, I cannot believe this game exists. For years, Nintendo fans have been begging for a remake of Mario RPG, or at least a port of the game on modern consoles, but it seemed like this was never gonna happen. If you don't know, back when the original game released, it was co-developed by Square Enix, and them and Nintendo aren't really on fantastic terms today, so it didn't seem like this was ever gonna happen. However, like some unheard of gift from the gods, Nintendo announced a full remake of this game in their summer direct of this year, and oh my god did it look great. The game looks so good, and looked like it retained all the goofy charm that made the original so special, and when the game finally released, it was just as good as everyone imagined. The game controlled fantastic, and fixed a lot of the stupid things that people had problem with in the original. The best part about this game is that they still kept the weird charm that the original had, which is important because that's what made the original game so special and memorable. There have also been a few additional improvements to the battle system. The main addition are these new super moves that you can perform during battle with all your characters. I think this is a really cool addition, and adds an extra depth to the battle system that wasn't originally there. It actually reminds me of something that would appear in the Mario and Luigi series. All in all, this is one of the best end-of-the-year cap-offs that Nintendo has ever had, and honestly, it's probably one of the best ones that have happened on the Switch. With all of these games in mind, this has easily been one of the best years of the Nintendo Switch's life, only bested by the amazing year that was 2017. However, the Switch is starting to reach the end of its life cycle, and we did get a good amount of remakes, remasters, and ports this year, so maybe we'll see more of that as the Switch's life cycle comes to an end. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait till next year to see what happens. The first major release we got this year came on February 16th with the release of Mario vs. Donkey Kong. This game is a remake of the original Mario vs. Donkey Kong game that came out on the GBA in 2004, and I never actually got a chance to play that game, so I was super excited for this game's release. And after waiting a little bit for it to release, and finally being able to get it in my hands, I can confidently say that this game is pretty good. Now, right off the bat, this is a much smaller title than pretty much any of the other Mario games that we've seen on the Switch so far, but don't let that fact detract from how really good this game is. This is a pretty simple, but super fun and creative puzzle game that places you in the role as Mario, who is hunting down Donkey Kong after he stole a bunch of these mini Mario toys. I think the different puzzles and levels that you're presented with in this game are super fun, but I do find it kinda annoying how they reuse the same ideas over and over again throughout the game. I also feel like Mario controls just a little bit janky here, with him feeling kinda loose and slippery to control, even when you're not playing in any of the ice levels. Though despite these two complaints, this game is super well done, and a really well done remake remake of a game a lot of people never really got the chance to play. The next big game we got was Princess Peach Showtime on March 22nd, and this is probably one of the most brain-dead games I've ever played in my life. Just like I said in my review of this game earlier this year, this game tries to do a lot of things and work with a bunch of different concepts, but falls flat in almost every attempt. In literally every level, Peach is forced into these different types of abilities, which completely disregard the normal Peach gameplay that you get at the beginning of the game. Instead of trying to juggle a bunch of different ideas and gameplay modes, I think it would have been a much better idea to just focus on the normal Peach gameplay and develop that throughout the game. Instead, we got a bunch of little ideas that just kind of feel shallow and useless in the overall game. Now, I know I'm not exactly the target demographic for this game, mainly because I'm not like a 10-year-old girl, but I feel like a game like this should be enjoyable by a lot of people. Overall, this game is super disappointing. It is another example of Nintendo poorly handling Peach as a character, getting off of that pretty dog shit game. We got Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door on May 23rd, and this is probably the best games that Nintendo has ever released on the Switch. Now, right off the bat, I never got the chance to play the original game on the GameCube, mainly because I wasn't willing to shell out $200 just for one game, but for years, I'd heard nothing but great things about this game. However, I, and many fans alike, were doubtful of this game ever getting remade, or at least ported, mainly because of how Nintendo was pushing the series forward after this entry. But when this game got announced back in the September Direct of 2023, I was super excited. So after a couple months of waiting, I finally got this game in my hands, and I'm happy to say that this game is just as good as everyone has been saying for years. First off, this is a beautiful remake, and took a game that already looked pretty good and enhanced it greatly. And in all honesty, if you just see this game with no context, you'd probably think it's a modern day game. They also added a bunch of easier ways to switch your partners during the game via the newly added character wheel, which I think is a really great addition and makes the game feel a little less clunky. So all in all, this remake is fantastic and a wonderful game that respects the original greatly. The next major title we got this year came on June 27th with the release of Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, and I feel like this game came and went with pretty much no fanfare. This game was announced back in the Summer Direct of 2023 during the massive Mario scissor reel, and I feel like no one gave a shit about this game from its announcement. However, I loved the original Luigi's Mansion 2, so I was super excited for this remaster. So when I finally got my hands on this game earlier this summer, it's just about as much as I expected. Now right off the bat, this is the exact same game as the 3DS original, for better or worse. I know a lot of people aren't really fond of the level-based structure that this game has, and in all honesty, it doesn't work really well for a game like this, but honestly, it's not as bad as people say. Another thing that's really odd about this remaster are the visuals. Most of the remasters and remakes we've covered, Nintendo did a pretty good job at enhancing the visuals in these games, but here, nothing is really done to make the game look better. Well, yes, the game is now running in HD, which makes it look a lot less chunky than the original, and Luigi now has his Luigi's Mansion 3 model. Outside of that, I mean, why couldn't they have gone back in this game and upgraded to look on the visual level of Luigi's Mansion 3? I mean, Nintendo does own Next Level Games, so it couldn't have been that hard. Even if they didn't want to mess with the visuals, why not add the Luigi's Mansion remake from the 3DS into this package, kind of pulling a Pikmin 1+2 thing? This would have added so much value to this package, and probably get people way more interested in it. Overall, while I do think that Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is a really fun game, it's just a super disappointing package. However, getting off of that bummer of a game, the next big game we got came on September 26th, with the release of The Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. And oh my god, it's about time we got a game where you can play as Zelda. Right away, I've never played this game, but from all the stuff that I've seen of it online, it looks pretty cool. This is the first 2D Zelda game that we've seen with the same ideology that was first established in Breath of the Wild. What I mean by this is that this is the first 2D Zelda game where there are several different ways at tackling a problem, instead of there just being one way like in Link's Awakening. This is a super cool idea, and adds that more creative thought process into this game that you had to have while playing Breath of the Wild. I also think that it's kind of interesting how this game uses the visual style first established in Link's Awakening. Like I said before, I already enjoyed the new visual style established in that remake, so if this is going to be the main 2D Zelda style going forward, I'm okay with that. I also like the new ability of Zelda being able to copy things, even if I think it's kind of dumb that she can't directly attack things. It kind of adds a more creative way of thinking in this game, and you know what, I think that works really well. And from there, that's pretty much as deep as I can go without playing the game. So final big release we got this year came on November 7th with the release of Mario & Luigi Brothership. And oh my god, it's about time we got a new game in this series. I've been a fan of this series pretty much my whole life. I mean, I've played every single game in the series and am even working on a full retrospective of the series. So I was obviously super excited whenever this game got announced. However, I was kind of scared for this release, mainly because Alpha Dream was no longer developing this series, mainly because they went bankrupt a few years back. However, I'm happy to say that this game delivers on almost all fronts, despite a few little flaws. First and foremost, the visuals. And yeah, they're pretty freaking good. This game takes the expressive sprite art from the previous games and throws them into 3D character models and environments, and it looks pretty great. This is by far one of the most visually unique Mario games that we've ever seen, only equal to the original Alpha Dream games and Mario Wonder. The battle system has also had a few overhauls made to it. Instead of Mario and Luigi performing their simple attacks by themselves, they now help each other perform these attacks to do extra damage. I really like this idea. I feel like it helps make itself more unique from the rest of the series. It helps to push the idea of brotherly bond in this game. I also really like the world that you travel through in this game. It's all based around plugs, and I feel like this kind of dumb idea works really well for the Mario and Luigi series. However, the bad thing about this game is just how damn long it is. I know that RPGs are usually longer games, but this one is just far too long. However, despite this complaint, I really like this game, and think that it's a really good step forward for the series, and I personally can't wait for the next game. And that's it for this year. And it was definitely a lesser one when compared to the Switch's overall life. With this year being mostly composed of remakes and remasters, it seems like this is the final year for the Nintendo Switch. So maybe next year we'll see more remakes and remasters or brand new titles for the Switch's successor. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. The only major game release that we've gotten so far this year is Donkey Kong Country Returns HD. And yep, this game definitely confirms that we're at the very end of the Switch's life cycle. Now, as of me making this video, this game hasn't even released yet, but just going off of the things that I've seen about it, it doesn't really look great. Like I talked about before, 2024 was filled with a bunch of remakes and remasters, which helped to hint at the fact that we were reaching the end of the Switch's life. And with this game being announced back in June, and the release date being January 2025, it showed that the Switch was going to be on life support in early 2025. It's kind of in line with Luigi's Mansion 2 HD that we got last year. While it is super cool that you can now play this game and Tropical Freeze on the same console, this just isn't up to the same par of remasters that we've seen previously. I really wish that they remade all the assets in this game to look on par to Tropical Freeze. It's certainly starting to show its age. They also removed and changed a lot of weird stuff in this remaster, like a bunch of the different particle effects that happen in the game. Overall, it is super cool that you can now play this really good game on the Switch. It's just a pretty disappointing remaster. And that's it. Now, I know I skipped over a few of the first party games that Nintendo released, or at least published for this console, but the script is already 20 pages long, and I would like to be done typing now. I hope you all enjoyed this look back at the Switch's life, and most of the big games that came out for it. I have so many memories associated with the Switch, and it's probably my most played console of all time. And hey, with the Switch 2's recent announcement, here's to hoping that we get a bunch of memorable games and experiences on that platform. And hopefully it doesn't end up like the Wii U again.